You're listening to a conversation between a pilot and air traffic control. Everything sounds fast, technical, almost coded, until one oddly simple word cuts through all that precision. Roger. Not yes, not okay, just Roger. And strangely, no one questions it. In fact, it sounds exactly right in that moment. But why? Why would professionals operating in one of the most high-stakes environments in the world choose such a specific word instead of simply saying yes? Before we go further, make sure to subscribe to the channel and drop a like, because some of the simplest things we hear every day often hide meanings we've completely misunderstood. But here's the surprising truth. Roger doesn't actually mean yes, and that's where most people get it wrong. When a pilot says Roger, they're not agreeing to anything. They're not confirming compliance. What they're really saying is, I have received and understood your message. Nothing more, nothing less. And that distinction matters more than you think. Because in aviation, saying yes can actually be dangerous. It sounds counterintuitive at first. After all, yes feels clear, direct, universal. But imagine this. Air traffic control gives an instruction, turn left immediately. The pilot responds, yes. What does that actually confirm? Did they understand the instruction? Did they hear it correctly? Are they going to execute it now, or are they just acknowledging it? That ambiguity is exactly what aviation tries to eliminate. Here's what surprises most people. Aviation communication isn't built around casual conversation. It's built around eliminating doubt. Every word is chosen for one reason: clarity under pressure. And yes is surprisingly vague. That's why aviation uses a standardized set of responses, each with a very specific meaning. Roger means the message was received and understood. But if a pilot is actually going to follow the instruction, they usually say something else, like repeating the instruction back. For example, instead of saying yes, a pilot might respond, turning left, or even repeat the full instruction, turning left heading 270. This is where most people get confused. They assume Roger is a confirmation of action, but it's not. It's only a confirmation of reception. And that difference exists because of how communication evolved in aviation. To understand that, you have to go back to a time before modern digital communication, back to early radio. In the early days of radio transmission, especially during military operations, communication was often unclear. Static, interference, weak signals, everything made it harder to understand what was being said. So operators developed a system where each letter of the alphabet had a corresponding word. The letter R stood for received. But instead of saying just R, which could easily be misheard, they used a word that clearly represented it. That word was Roger. So originally, saying Roger literally meant R, received. And even as technology improved, the habit stuck, because it worked. It was short, it was distinct, and most importantly, it reduced misunderstandings. Over time, aviation adopted and refined these communication standards into what we now know as radio telephony procedures. And here's the key idea. In this system, words are not chosen because they sound natural, they're chosen because they're hard to misinterpret. Roger cuts through noise. It doesn't sound like many other words. It's unlikely to be confused with anything else, even in poor signal conditions. And in an environment where a misunderstanding can have serious consequences, that reliability matters more than simplicity. So while yes might feel more intuitive in everyday life, in aviation it's actually less useful, because yes answers a question, but Roger confirms a message. And in the sky, that difference can be the line between clarity and confusion. Now here's where it gets even more interesting. Because Roger is only one piece of a much larger communication system. And once you see how it all fits together, you realize something surprising. Pilots almost never rely on a single word to communicate something important. That's because aviation communication isn't just about being understood, it's about being understood correctly the first time. And this is where most people get confused. They assume that as long as the message gets across, it's good enough. But in aviation, good enough isn't acceptable. There's no room for guessing, interpreting, or assuming. So instead of casual replies, pilots and controllers use layered confirmation. For example, if air traffic control gives a critical instruction like climb to 10,000 feet, the pilot doesn't just say, "Roger." They repeat it back, climbing to 10,000 feet. This is called a readback, and it's one of the most important safety practices in aviation, because now the controller hears their own instruction echoed back and can instantly catch any mistake. If the pilot misheard it and says climbing to 12,000 feet, the controller can immediately correct it before anything happens. This is where aviation communication becomes almost like a built-in error checking system. And here's what surprises most people. Even silence can be dangerous. If a pilot doesn't respond clearly, the controller can't assume anything. They don't know if the message was received, misunderstood, or completely missed. That's why specific words like Roger, Wilco, and full readbacks exist. They remove uncertainty. Now here's another detail that most people never notice. Roger is often confused with another word, Wilco. They sound similar in purpose, but they're not the same. Wilco means will comply. So when a pilot says Wilco, they're not just acknowledging the message, they're confirming that they will follow the instruction. And here's the interesting part. Technically, saying Roger Wilco is redundant because Wilco already includes the meaning of Roger. But people still say both sometimes, especially outside strict aviation contexts, because it feels more complete. This is where you start to see the philosophy behind all of this. Aviation doesn't just aim for communication, it aims for precision without interpretation. Every word has a job, every response has a specific meaning, and nothing is left to assumption. And when you step back, you realize something bigger. This isn't just about pilots, it's about how humans deal with complexity. In everyday life, we rely on context, tone, and shared understanding. We say, yeah, okay, got it, and trust the other person to interpret what we mean. But in environments where mistakes have real consequences, that kind of communication isn't enough. So systems like aviation strip language down to its most functional form, clear, direct, unambiguous. And that's why Roger still exists today. Not because it sounds cool, not because it's tradition, but because it solves a very real problem, making sure a message is received and understood without confusion. So the next time you hear a pilot say Roger, you'll know they're not agreeing, they're confirming clarity. And in a world where misunderstandings are common, that might be more important than saying yes. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more explanations like this. Because sometimes the simplest things hide the most misunderstood truths.